The sin of wrath can be described as uncontrolled feelings of anger, rage, or hatred. It can be one of the most destructive of the seven deadly sins. It can be the thing that kind of destroys your life the most out of all of them. Of course, there are even a couple more worse ones that I'll be talking about in the coming days. But I've already gone through 4. This is episode 5 of the series where I'm talking about the seven deadly sins. This time I'm going to be talking about wrath. I'm going to be breaking it down. Some actually potential good from it, but majority of it being very, very bad, and what can be very, very detrimental to you in your life if you fall into angry feelings and behaviors consistently. How it works, how you can avoid it, and of course, how you can improve so that you can stop being angry, stop being vengeful and rageful, and instead learn to love others instead of hating. So let's get right into it. I make a podcast episode every single day for 365 days. You will be hated for speaking the truth.
You definitely have like an X-ray goggles on, where you can see someone's aura.
A house divided against itself shall not stand. Matthew chapter 12, verse 25.
If you want to make something of yourself, forget your political beliefs.
Because different believers experience God in different ways, different non-believers need different explanations to see God as real. Things that make you angry suck you in.
Satan's plan fails, right? And God's plan prevails.
So when you're committing the sin of wrath, you're angry, you're raging, you're filled with hatred. It is actually a very intense emotional state with physical effects involved. Your heart rate will go up, your blood pressure will rise, stress hormones will be secreted, and it is actually something that physiologically you feel it. You feel it in your body, and your body tries to compensate, I guess, a little bit. But your body produces these things, and when you're feeling a certain way, and sometimes it can just be a storm, and it can be so uncontrollable. And I've seen it destroy so many people. I've seen it kind of hurt me in many aspects of my life, and I've seen how, if left unchecked, anger can be something truly, truly terrible. The funny thing about anger and wrath as a sin, wrath is basically like the encompassing effects of everything. Like the word I usually like to use that's very, very good word is resentment, harboring resentment for people. But whether it be through anger, literally like complete rage, like a madness type of like just rage, or just deep hatred, resentment for people, wrath kind of encompasses all of those feelings in one. But anger in and of itself, so just isolating anger in and of itself actually like isn't sin. Funnily enough, it actually isn't bad because, for example, you can stub your toe and you could just jump around in anger, or you hurt yourself in some way that kind of is unrelated to anything other than pain or a circumstance, and you're angry. And you're just in the moment, you're just angry, maybe you say a curse word, right? And it's like, and it's like, I think that in and of itself, obviously you should still control yourself. I think it's not sin, right? And I've done some research on it, of course, theologically and physiologically, philosophically. When you're just angry in the moment of something happening like that, something like just a little bit mundane, let's say, it's not actually sin. When it becomes sin is if it starts to be directed at another person, especially if that's an innocent person. Regardless of whether or not it's an innocent person, it's even worse if it's an innocent person, if you put the blame on someone, or if someone hurts you in some way and then you get angry at that person, then that's when it becomes sin. If it becomes long lasting, or if it's lingering, like that resentment, right? You harboring resentment for people. If it lasts a long time, if it's not just like a thing that happened in the moment, you think about it and it's in your head and you actually can't forgive the person in your mind because you're just so rageful towards them. Or if it desires excessive punishment. So in extreme cases, violence and hurting, you want to hurt the other person, or you want them to get hurt in some way. That type of a desire, that's when the sin of anger, wrath, whatever you want to call it, it actually becomes sin. It actually becomes something truly detrimental. In an isolated moment, anger is not always a bad thing. And sometimes anger absolutely can be used as fuel. If you're angry at someone, it can be used as fuel for you to do better. That's a positive thing that comes from it. But it's very, very hard to control that emotion. You can't just isolate in your mind and compartmentalize, oh yeah, let's use this for good and let's avoid the bad. No, because we as humans, we're emotional beings. More often than not, you're going to, even if there is some good, it's going to be majority bad. It's going to be majority sin. And in the most extreme cases, of course, it leads to violence and it leads to the worst. The end of anger is murder. Of course, there's the most famous teaching by Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount where he says, you've heard it said of old time, thou shalt not murder, but I say to you, if you have anger for someone in your heart, you're in danger of the judgment. It's basically considered the same thing because the end of anger is murder. And that's what he's trying to say. If you don't check those feelings, if those feelings are left unchecked, it leads to the terrible, terrible violence and tragedies we see in the world. Because it starts with some anger towards whatever, towards politically, towards a group of people, towards a specific person, towards just people around you, or towards just being angry, and then you're just letting it out to whoever can take the punch, or to whoever's just right in front of you in the moment. That's where it gets very extremely bad, and that's where some of the worst tragedies in the world happen, because of people that are harboring a level of resentment that has been left unchecked, and maybe they have some mental problems, but then that coupled with some very harsh traumas, the way they were raised, the way they grew up, that led to them just being an angry, hateful, vengeful person, then it leads to the worst violences and murders. But internally, we are all internally capable of that. Maybe you in yourself, in your own life, have wished the death upon someone, even for a second. You wished someone to be killed because of something they did to you. Maybe for a second, and then you realize, okay, that's still wrong. Or maybe you just harbor that resentment. Because internally, we are all capable of it. That is the end of anger. I truly believe that if we all, if each and every one of us was provoked to a certain extent, it would lead us to violence. I think that is human nature. Every one of us have different thresholds to when that violence will occur. Some people, that threshold is very, very low, and that's why a lot of unfortunate tragedies in the world do happen every day. But a lot of us who are pretty calm in ourselves have a much higher threshold, but I think there is still a threshold. Each and every one of us are capable of very bad violence. And it starts with that internal feeling of anger, those emotions, those physical changes happening to you. And then you're rationalizing in your mind stuff, and it just falls even further into an exponential hellhole of terror and very, very bad sin, which is why wrath is something that is very, very tough to deal with. It is something that is it's a very, very deep, deep thing. The looking for vengeance part is pretty important, right? Because someone hurts you, right? Whether they say something mean, they insult you, or they physically hurt you, or they screw you over in some other aspect, like in your business or whatever. They ghost you, whatever it may be. Vengeance is a very, very tough one to deal with, and it is provoked by anger. Anger leads to you wanting to seek revenge. And tomorrow I'm going to be talking about the sin of envy, which anger and envy in ways are linked, and a lot of envy is that vengeful type of desire, but it is provoked primarily by anger. Anger is the first thing that you feel when you want to take revenge on someone. It might be provoked a little bit by the jealousy, but more so than not, it is anger that is the primary driver there. And it all starts with, again, just one small moment, one small internal voice. You listen to the voice of sin in your head, and you kind of hold resentment. The longer you hold resentment, the worse, not only the worse it will make you feel, but the more likely it is that you are going to hurt someone in some way, whether with violence or with your words. But yes, people hurt you, right? Some people just suck. Some people are just hard to be around. I know for a fact, I've gone through it in recent times in my life, that some people are just hard to be around. Some people just make it very hard for you to show grace and make it very easy for you to get angry at them. I understand that might be the case. But regardless, it's still up to you to give it to God. It is still up to you to control what you can control, what you have the power to control. You can't control what the other person might say or do to you to mess you up, to make you feel angry towards them. Some people are just like that. You can't fix them. What you can focus on is yourself, and what you can focus on is what you do and your faith, and you letting God handle it rather than you trying to play God. What anger is you're trying to play God, essentially, in your mind. God's wrath is real, and it's true. And there's a verse here I have, Romans 12, chapter 12, verse 19. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. It is God's job to have wrath. God's wrath is real. God's punishment, his judgment, his righteous judgment is real. So for people who are truly going against God, he will judge them in the end, and his wrath will be executed on them in the end. It's not your job. It's not your place to be angry at them and do something bad to them to hurt them to get your revenge. you're doing it selfishly and you're doing it truly for yourself, and you are going against God. You're trying to play the act of God, but it is God's job to invoke the wrath and the punishment, the just punishment for their wrong actions onto that person. It's not your job. Your job is to continue to stay faithful to God and continue to love him and seek him and listen to his teachings and listen to his words, because his words tell you how bad anger can get and how bad it can just truly destroy a man. James chapter 1 verse 20. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. If all you're focused on is your hatred towards someone, your anger towards someone, it is moving you very far away from God. And it is moving you away from righteousness. It's moving you away towards the potential, even if you don't actually commit a very bad act, the potential inside of your mind, or you're fantasizing about it, to just invoke sin and evil rather than what God wants from you, the righteousness, the righteous behavior God wants from you. What God really wants is, like, whenever someone hurts you, to then for you to show love back to them rather than hate them and eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Again, that's what Jesus says. It's not eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. It's love your enemies, right? It's love your enemies, love those that hate you, instead of trying to enact revenge and getting back at them. Again, that's the Sermon on the Mount. That's why the Sermon on the Mount is so amazing. There's been so many times I've quoted it just off the fly in this Seven Deadly Sins series, because Jesus himself talked very, very specifically and in the best way possible about a lot of these issues and a lot of these sins that we are susceptible to. Perhaps it feels good in the moment. Like, it always feels better in the moment whenever someone says something against you, for you to have this crazy comeback and, like, humble them and do whatever, right? And let your anger be known and let your emotions be felt. It feels good in the moment, but then immediately you'll realize just how kind of shameful it is in the long run. Because again, you're not God, right? It's not your place to enact judgment onto people or to render eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. No. That's God's job, and God's wrath is real and true. So let him do his job and do your job, which is to love that person and truly be a light in the world and the salt in the world, as Jesus talks about, instead of letting anger completely control you. It's very tough. I get it, because anger is a very, very overwhelming emotion at times, and I've felt it myself, and it's been very hard for me to control that many times in my life. But the easiest way is by giving it to God. The easiest way is by thinking about what God would want you to do. And when someone hurts you, you can't control that. What you can control is how you treat them back. Treat others the way you would like to be treated, right? Of course, right? Of course, it's the most basic thing, and it's easier said than done. But these are the kind of the steps you have to take just mentally. When someone hurts you, don't let the anger kind of sit. Understand that if you let it sit, it will only get worse and worse and worse. Reconcile with that person, or leave that person, or do whatever you can so that you're not constantly having to deal with whatever thing is making you angry, right? And try to do better. And if it's a person that's hurting you, then kind of give them love. Don't give them hate. Give them love. And it's tough, but that's really what Jesus Christ is calling us to do, instead of enacting our wrath on them. That's God's job. Let us do what God calls us to do, which is love them. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Sorry, I miswrote it here. It's a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. So you can choose to distill any kind of conflict by loving and by saying soft words, saying the right words, saying words of love rather than hate. You can choose to kind of move down the levels of kind of like the blood pressures and anger levels of other people through what you say. But if you're going to provoke others to anger, that's only going to make everybody angry. It's going to make everybody wrathful and rageful and vengeful and all these bad feelings that I've been talking about. It can also be provoked by you yourself, right? If you say things to hurt other people, or you do an act that hurts them, it'll only make them more angry. So what you can do is in a tough moment, in a moment where you're angry, if you say righteous words, loving words, soft words as described in the Proverbs, it will kind of change the situation. If someone's mad at you, it will make them less mad at you, at the very least, a little bit less mad at you. But if you continue to kind of stir the pot, add to the conflict, add words of hatred, of insult, or of whatever, It will only make the situation more like extremely even more worse. And that's kind of how anger can just continue to spiral out of control. It's words versus actions, right? Words versus actions. Someone can use words to hurt you, or they use actions to hurt you, but you at the same time can also use words to hurt them and actions to hurt them. Regardless, most of the time, both of you will end up being angry, because I guess they're angry at you or you're angry at them, and you started or they started. It doesn't matter who started it. It'll lead to just a lot of conflict, a lot of problems, and if it gets worse, a lot of things that everyone will just completely regret. Words being said, insults being thrown out, or in extreme cases, punches being thrown, violence being had. And we just don't want that. We just don't want that. And on our conscience and our souls, it just makes us feel a lot more sorrowful inside when we have bad relationships with people, when we do have resentment towards other people. And of course, that's part of the reason why God warns us and advises us against anger and against wrath, because it also hurts us. It hurts us way, like, it doesn't help us at all. There's the tiniest little sliver of the way it helps us, how I kind of talked a little bit about how if you use it in the right way, anger can be a good fuel to doing better and improving yourself. But I think that's a very small window in comparison to how much it can hurt us and how bad it can be for us. God is advising us and warning us against it for a reason, because not only does it go against him, and not only does it kind of make us play the role of God, which is just truly not true, not righteous, and not good in any way, and we will be humbled for doing that if we do. But also, if we fall into things of anger, we will do things that we will regret, and other people will do things that they will regret, or we'll do things to them that we'll all regret, and we'll just be sitting there kind of in even deeper sorrows and perhaps even deeper angers and resentments until things just go so exponentially out of control. So anger is a very, very hard thing to control. Hard thing to control. But if you remember that God's power is greater than your own, he can help you. He can help you kind of calm your wrath, calm your fire a little bit, and be humble and be loving and kind rather than hateful. Even if the other person probably deserves to be hated back for the way that they might treat you. It's up to you. It's cause and effect, right? The other person does something to you, and then it is kind of your decision to do something back, right? Whatever you do will affect the situation either for better or for worse. What they do to you, it's up to you to kind of internalize it and make the right decision. Make the decision which is for the better good, which is to treat them with love, to treat them better. Or if it's really bad, to just cut them off and stop the conversation right there, or to not talk to them again. If the situation that is making you angry, the person that's making you angry is just unbearable, right? Then I think kind of distancing yourself is also a pretty good strategy as well. It's better than saying something or doing something that everyone will regret in a moment of rage and anger and wrath. But it is cause and effect. It is what you do that will affect the situation even more than what someone else did to you. And of course, anger, sometimes you can justify because, of course, someone will do something to you, right? Like, people will hate, right? People will insult you. People will say stuff that hurts you or do things that hurt you. If you kind of do things back, it will only just make the situation worse. So control what you can control. Give it up to God. Let God work many amazing things in you. And be calm. Be stoic. Be able to overcome any angry, vengeful feeling. And take a deep breath, right? I think the feeling of anger, like the actual emotional feeling, will kind of always be there if you're ever in a situation like that. You have to just take a deep breath, kind of wait it out. If you act right away on the impulse, it is just going to make all of those things that I've been talking about happen, and everyone's going to leave with regrets. But if you take a moment to just breathe, take a second, gather your thoughts, calm yourself, and then respond to the situation in a more loving manner, in a more respectful, righteous manner, then it will make the situation a lot better. It will make everybody a lot less angry, a lot less vengeful overall. I think in general. Sometimes, again, you can't fix people. Sometimes other people will kind of mess you up, right? And I think that's kind of the case where you just kind of have to distance yourself a bit, because the more you kind of have these feelings in your mind, the more you have the resentment, again, as I said, it will only just slowly exponentially get worse, and you can very, very, very quickly fall into a very, very slippery slope. So anger, it's all about emotional self-control. And anger is probably, wrath is like the most important need for self-control. Of course, all of these sins in a way kind of apply that. If you can control your emotions, you give it to God, let him work in you instead of trying to do everything yourself, then that will help you overcome the sin. The devil wants you to kind of fall into the sin. He wants you to rationalize things and think of it as good. He wants you to think of it as, yeah, it's okay. I showed him, right? I told him off, right? I did that, and it's so good. It will only lead to even more because another person will, the other person that you're telling off or doing whatever you're doing to in a moment of anger, will only find a way to get back at you, right? So if you're vengeful for someone else, then like someone hurts you, you enact your revenge on them in whatever way, whether through words or through actions, then they're just going to go and enact an even greater revenge on you, and it's going to be a cycle where you all just until you all just get destroyed and you all just get completely burnt out and messed up because of your anger and your inability to control it. So I know I have problems controlling my anger at times, but you have to give it to God, and that's the first thing, the first step to moving forward from vengeful, wrathful feelings. And sometimes, one final kind of point on anger before I wrap this episode up. Sometimes anger can be unmerited, and that's where it's even worse and even more sinful. If the person is truly innocent, if you're just angry at a situation in your life, and then just whoever person is standing there, you kind of like just pour out your anger onto them, even if they did nothing wrong. That happens all the time, right? You know, the kind of the the stereotypical situation where like a man and woman are married and they have kids and they kind of hate each other. Like the man comes home from work and then the woman has been so accustomed to being angry all the time, so then she starts to build resentment for the man, and they slowly start to hate each other more and more and more, not because of anything they did, just because of psychology, just because she was in an angry moment and then he walked in the door, so she in her mind links the two together. It's a common thing that happens all the time, and that's an example, but it can happen in many other situations. Sometimes you're angry at someone and they didn't do anything wrong. They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. You're angry at another situation and you kind of let it out in front of them or at them, and you put the blame on them, or you just they were just a scapegoat in the moment. That's an even worse form of anger because it's unrighteous judgment, right? It is like someone having a punishment, which is your wrath towards them, that they don't deserve, right? And that's even worse. So you need to be able to kind of keep it in you, right? If you're angry at something that isn't related to any specific person, you shouldn't be putting the blame and putting the anger and hating on people who are innocent. That is probably an even worse level of anger than if someone actually hurt you and you're angry at them for hurting you. Sometimes you can be angry at someone and they don't deserve it. That is the worst form of it. And that is definitely something God calls us against doing. So in that moment, you need to just keep it in, right? If someone is walking in to the room as you're getting angry at a specific thing, you don't need to say anything. You don't need to lash out. You just kind of say, yeah, nod your head or do whatever you can, like to just avoid anything that kind of gets out of hand, let's say. Because again, built up resentment just leads to so many problems, strains in relationships, all sorts of issues that God specifically advises us against because he knows how vengeful and rageful we can become as humans and how bad it can hurt us. So follow the works of God and the words of God to control your anger, control your wrath. The feelings, I think, will always be there, but it's up to you to have emotional self-control with them and be able to overcome them and treat people truly with love. So here's the reflection portion. Ask yourself some of these questions and truly think. Are you a very angry person? Are you a person, and answer these questions honestly so that you can try to do better and overcome potential feelings of wrath that you might be feeling within yourself. If someone hurts you, says something, or does something bad to you, is your first thought a thought of hatred? Is it a thought of vengeance, of revenge? Do you come up with fantasies in your mind about ways you can get back at people if they say something bad to you? Do you get into arguments with people and then later you think of the perfect response that would have humbled them or shut them up or whatever? Do you think in that way? Do you think of fantasies in that way? Do you leave tough situations with harboring a lot of resentment? When you get into a conflict with someone, do you try and resolve it, or do you just fuel the fire even more? When you're angry, do you have control over the anger, or do you lash out in ways that other people hate or you even hate yourself for? Do you sometimes feel guilty because you make the wrong decision and you hurt someone? Have you ever hurt anyone because of something they did to you? Have you ever lashed out at someone who didn't do anything wrong to you just because you were in a bad mood? Have you ever been angry at someone just for being in a bad mood? Have you ever woken up being grumpy and giving attitude to other people and being sarcastic to other people because just of your own mood, not because of anything they did? Do you have like deeper anger issues where you can't, the smallest thing ticks you off? Or does it take a lot for you to get mad, or do you get mad at the smallest little issue? Ask yourself some of these questions. Ask yourself some of these questions and truly find an answer. Truly try and find an answer. If you're an angry person, if you fall into a lot of these problems, it's okay because God is with you. You have to trust in Him, but you have to understand that these are problems, these are sins, and they're only going to hurt you. They're going to hurt the relationships you have around you, and then they're going to, of course, hurt your relationship with God. Do you find that in relationships you are very quick to put the blame on other people? Are you a conscious person who understands when it's your fault, or are you constantly putting the blame on other people? Are you constantly playing the victim? Are you committing acts of physical violence towards people? Have you done that ever in your life? Have you ever wanted to? Right? It's not even doing it. Have you ever harbored the thought in your mind? Again, ask these questions to yourself and try and find the answers. And if you don't like what you hear, if you don't like what you're thinking about yourself, truly just give it to God and start taking the next steps to overcoming these sins. At least now you would know that it is sin, and you know that it is a very negative feeling, harboring that resentment within you that is hurting you and hurting a lot of other people. So start by taking the steps to being calmer, by increasing the tolerance you have, that you don't get angry so easily, and slowly build and act out of love rather than hate. That is what God calls us to do every day. So that's it. That's all I got to say for this episode of the 7 Deadly Sins series. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about envy, which envy and wrath, there are a lot of relationships to it, which I will be mentioning tomorrow in tomorrow's episode. So I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, truly leave your support in any way you can. Share this video to someone who needs it. Share the playlist of the 7 Deadly Sins series to someone who would find it interesting, to someone who would perhaps need some of this advice to help them in their life. And of course, subscribe on YouTube and follow the show on Spotify if you haven't done that yet. I'd appreciate your support in any way that you can. That's all I got to say for today. Thank you for watching this episode on wrath. I hope I did a good job in explaining it. I tried my best. Let me know if there was anything I missed, of course, in the comments section. And I will see you tomorrow for the next episode of the 7 Deadly Sins series.